The heroes get the statues, the villains get a flat stone, in a forgotten corner of a city that barely remembers their name. Tonight, we change that. Why travel to the graves of the men who made you afraid, the ones who made the hero worth cheering for? Some resting places will surprise you. Some will break your heart, because behind every cold stare and whispered threat was a real person who lived a real life. This is where they ended up, Marlon Brando. There is no headstone, no marble, no name carved in stone anywhere on this earth. Aroa, a private atoll in the South Pacific, 33 miles north of Tahiti, where the water is the color of glass and the air smells of rain and salt. This is where a portion of Marlon Brando was scattered after his death. The rest of his ashes were spread over Death Valley, California. He asked for no grave. He got none. Say his name and one image comes first. Don Vito Corleone, the low voice, the cotton stuffed in the cheeks, the cat that wandered onto the set by accident and ended up in the most iconic opening scene in film history. Brando didn't play the Godfather as a monster. He played him as a patriarch, and that choice made him terrifying in a way no screaming villain ever could be. He arrived in Hollywood in the late 1940s like a disruption. By 30, he had already won an Oscar. He had already changed what acting meant. But here is what most people never knew. His father was cold and absent. His mother was an alcoholic. He once said he spent his entire life looking for love and never quite found it the way he needed. 11 children by multiple women. A son, Christian, who went to prison after shooting his sister's boyfriend dead in the family living room. A daughter, Cheyenne, who took her own life in 1995, just months after her brother's trial. Brando testified in court for his son while simultaneously burying his daughter. He carried those losses with a silence that never showed on screen. And then came the controversies that the industry never quite forgave. In 1973, he sent a Native American activist named Sakine Littlefeather to refuse his Oscar for The Godfather. On live television, in front of 85 million viewers, the Academy audience booed. Hollywood was furious. He didn't care. He believed in what he was protesting, the treatment of Native Americans in film, and he was willing to burn his reputation to say it. Later came accusations from his Last Tango in Paris co-star Maria Schneider, who alleged that a famous scene involving butter had not been fully consented to. The scene had been Brando's idea. Bertolucci confirmed it was kept from Schneider deliberately. Schneider said she felt humiliated and violated. She spent years speaking about it publicly. Brando said nothing. Bertolucci later apologized. Brando never did. In his final years, he retreated completely. He became reclusive on Aroa, enormous in size, invisible to the world. He died on July 1, 2004. He was 80. His ashes scattered over 2 places at once, a Pacific island and an American desert. As if even in death he could not be contained, could not be held still, could not be made to stay anywhere he didn't choose. The man who told us to make an offer they couldn't refuse left without making any arrangements at all. Just the ocean, just the desert, just silence. And the next man on this list didn't even get a proper goodbye, because by the time anyone found him, it was already far too late. Gene Hackman, somewhere on a hillside in Santa Fe, New Mexico, behind a gate, on 12 acres of private land with a view of the mountains in every direction. Gene Hackman spent his final years. He is buried on or near that same property in the land he loved, away from the world that once knew his name. He played Lex Luthor with a sly, amused cruelty that made Superman seem almost naive. But that was one note in a career of extraordinary range. The French Connection, Unforgiven, 2 Academy Awards. A man who could turn stillness into menace without raising his voice. And then in 2004, he simply stopped. He moved to Santa Fe permanently. He competed in car races well into his 70s. He wrote Western novels with his wife Betsy. He had chosen peace over fame, and he had found it until something changed. Slowly, quietly. His neighbors noticed he was moving more slowly. He stopped appearing in public. On February 26, 2025, he was found inside his home, alongside his wife Betsy and one of their dogs. All three were dead. What happened inside that house was devastating, and the details when they came out were almost unbearable to read. Betsy had died first, on February 11 from hantavirus, a rare, brutal disease carried by deer mice, often contracted by disturbing rodent droppings in enclosed spaces. She was gone in days. Hackman, already deep in the fog of advanced Alzheimer's disease, almost certainly didn't know she was gone. He had no idea he was alone. He had no idea she was dead, just feet away from him. His pacemaker recorded its last rhythm on February 18. He had not eaten for days. He starved, essentially, alone in a house in the mountains, unable to understand why no one was coming. He was 95 years old. The press coverage that followed immediately turned into a controversy of its own. Hackman had been intensely private for over 2 decades, refusing interviews, avoiding cameras, living entirely off the grid. When the story broke, reporters flooded Santa Fe. Neighbors who had protected his privacy for years were suddenly being asked questions they refused to answer. His family released a brief statement. That was all. The man who terrified audiences for 40 years was found in a mudroom near the kitchen, with his cane and sunglasses on the floors beside him. No red carpet, no studio lights, just silence, and a house in the mountains, and a love story that ended with no one knowing it was over. And there is a man who knew exactly what was coming for him, who kept the secret until he could no longer hold it, and even then he said nothing. Alan Rickman, the Golders Green Crematorium in North London. A quiet, leafy place in the borough of Barnet, surrounded by gardens and old trees, where the graves are marked with modest stones and the paths are shaded and still. It is not somewhere the cameras go. Alan Rickman's ashes rest here, in a place that feels earned rather than assigned. Hans Gruber fell from Nakatomi Tower on Christmas Eve, and audiences cheered, but the man who played him made you feel something more complicated than relief. Rickman gave Gruber wit, style, elegance, an almost aristocratic charm that made him the finest villain in the history of the action film. You watched him with something uncomfortably close to admiration. He came to film late. He was 41 years old when Die Hard was released. By then, he had spent nearly 2 decades on the London stage, building a technique that was unmistakable. That slow, deliberate voice. The pauses that felt like warnings. Behind that voice was a man of great private warmth that almost never reached the press. He had been with the same woman, political activist Rima Horton, since he was 19 years old. They married quietly in 2012 after 50 years together. He wrote letters by hand. He remembered birthdays. He was devoted to causes he never discussed publicly, and then came the diagnosis. Pancreatic cancer. Detected too late, he told almost no one. He continued working, directing, writing, attending events with the same composed presence that had defined his career. Those around him later said they could see the weight he was carrying, the way he moved, the way he paused before answering simple questions. He said nothing. The controversy that followed his death was quieter than most, but it cut deep for fans who felt blindsided. His friend Emma Thompson, who had known him for decades, spoke about finding out he was ill, and that even she had not known the full extent of it. Daniel Radcliffe, who had spent 10 years working beside him as Snape, said publicly that he wished he had known, that he would have wanted to say something. The grief was genuine. But underneath it ran a quieter feeling, that Rickman had made a choice, and the choice had been his to make. And perhaps that was the most Alan Rickman thing he had ever done. He died on January 14, 2016. He was 69 years old. The world found out and went very still. His Professor Snape, his Colonel Brandon, his Judge Turpin. They all suddenly felt different, like he had been saying goodbye in every scene and no one had noticed until it was over. His ashes rest in a garden in North London, where the only sound is wind through the trees, and there is nothing theatrical about it at all. The next man never got to see the role that made him immortal reach a single screen. He was already gone, Heath Ledger, Karrakatta Cemetery in Perth, Western Australia, one of the oldest cemeteries in the state, sitting in the suburb of Nedlands, where the light comes in low and golden in the late afternoon and the grass is dry and pale. He is buried in Section RC, a Catholic section, near the edge of the city where the Indian Ocean is close enough to smell on the right kind of day. His grave marker is simple. His family made sure of that. He made the Joker into something cinema had never seen. Not a supervillain, not a clown. Something genuinely unpredictable. A man who burned his plans, who laughed at order, who asked the only question no one else dared ask. The performance didn't feel like acting. It felt like a transmission from somewhere unreachable. He had come from Perth to Hollywood at 17, essentially alone. By 25, after Brokeback Mountain, he was considered one of the finest actors of his generation. He had a daughter, Matilda, with actress Michelle Williams. He was building something real, then he threw himself into the Joker with a totality that frightened the people around him. He kept a diary in character. He locked himself in a hotel room for weeks. He slept 2 hours a night during preparation. He said the role was a pleasure. He also said he couldn't turn it off. On January 22, 2008, a masseuse arrived at his Soho apartment in New York. She found him unresponsive, an accidental overdose of prescription medications, painkillers, sleeping pills, anti-anxiety drugs. The combination stopped his heart. He was 28 years old. The Dark Knight had not yet been released. What followed was one of the most painful public controversies in Hollywood's recent memory. His estate, worth approximately $16.3 million, had not been updated since 2003, before his daughter Matilda was born. The entire estate initially went to his parents and sisters. His daughter and the woman who had raised her received nothing. His family, to their enormous credit, voluntarily transferred the entire estate to Matilda. There were no legal battles, no public fights. They simply did the right thing, quietly, and let the lawyers announce it. But the other controversy did not go away so cleanly. The prescription medications that killed him had been prescribed by multiple doctors across multiple countries, a pattern that his death brought suddenly, sharply into focus. Several doctors were investigated. None were ultimately charged with wrongdoing. The system that had allowed a young man to accumulate a lethal combination of legal prescriptions without anyone noticing. That system was never meaningfully reformed. His family flew him home to Perth. He is buried near the ocean he grew up beside. In the city that made him before the world knew his name, he played a man who asked why so serious, and was buried at 28 in his hometown before the role that would define him for generations had ever reached a single screen. The next man on this list carried a face built by war, rebuilt by surgeons, and kept a secret that Hollywood spent decades trying to uncover: Jack Palance. There is a small private cemetery in the high desert of the Tehachapi Mountains in Southern California. Ranch country, open and sun-bleached, a landscape that belongs to no era in particular. This is where Jack Palance was buried in 2006, in soil he had chosen, in a place he had made his own over the last decades of his life. No crowds, no tourists, just the sky and the mountains and the silence he had always preferred. Jack Wilson and Shane, cold-eyed, dressed in black, arriving in town like a weather system. That single entrance changed Westerns. The villain didn't need to rage. He just had to be more still than anyone else in the room. But that face, the angular, asymmetrical face that made him look like a permanent threat, was not something he was born with. It was built. He served in World War II and suffered severe burns in a training aircraft accident. The reconstructive surgery reshaped his face completely. The look audiences found frightening was the result of war and the hands of surgeons. He never quite corrected the record while he was alive, and the rumors multiplied over the years that the face was from boxing injuries, that it was the result of something darker. He let them talk. The deeper secret, the one Hollywood genuinely never processed, was the scholar underneath the gunfighter. He studied at Stanford and the University of North Carolina. He painted seriously, not as a hobby, but with real technical ambition. He wrote poetry. He was fluent in Ukrainian, his parents' language, and he never let it go. The controversy around him was largely posthumous and mostly concerned money. His estate became complicated after his death. Properties in California, artwork, royalties from decades of film work, and the settlement among his survivors took years. He had not made things simple. He rarely did. He won an Academy Award for City Slickers in 1991 at 72 and performed one-armed push-ups on the stage in front of the entire room. The audience erupted. He had never stopped. He died on November 10, 2006. He was 87. He went the way he had lived, away from the crowds, in a landscape he respected, with no fuss and no announcement. The man who made black hats frightening is buried in the California high desert, where the sky goes all the way to the horizon, and there is no one watching. And the next man, he didn't just play a villain, he detonated the entire system, Dennis Hopper. The churchyard of San Francisco de Asís in Ranchos de Taos, New Mexico, one of the most photographed adobe churches in America, a place Georgia O'Keeffe painted, a place Ansel Adams photographed, a place that has been here since the 18th century. Dennis Hopper was buried in its small adjacent cemetery with a deliberately plain marker in 2010. Most visitors walk right past it. He played Howard Payne in Speed, a man who wired a bus to explode and genuinely seemed to enjoy every second of it. But Dennis Hopper's real villain was American cinema itself. He pushed it, broke it open, forced it to become something stranger and more honest than it had been before. Easy Rider in 1969 changed everything. He directed it, co-wrote it, starred in it. A film made for $360, Zin that earned $60 million. He was 33 years old and he had just detonated the studio system. Then came the decade that nearly killed him. Alcohol, hard drugs, and not casually. Hopper's substance abuse during the 1970s became the stuff of genuine legend, not the glamorous kind. He moved to Taos, New Mexico, where he lived in a compound he called the Mud Palace, and descended into a period of paranoia, violence, and creative chaos so severe that colleagues genuinely feared for his life. He was hospitalized multiple times. His behavior on set became so unpredictable that directors refused to cast him. He fired a shotgun at a truck during a delusional episode. He later claimed he had no memory of years at a time. The industry stopped calling. For nearly a decade, he was essentially finished, and then he got sober and came back completely. Blue Velvet in 1986, playing Frank Booth, one of the most genuinely terrifying screen presences of the decade. Nominated for an Academy Award for Hoosiers the same year, he had rebuilt himself from rubble. The controversy that followed him into his final years was a nasty and public divorce from his fifth wife, Victoria Duffy, which played out in the tabloids while he was dying of prostate cancer. He filed for divorce while in hospice care. She contested it. The legal battle continued after his death, tangling up his estate, including that world-class art collection almost no one knew he had. For 40 years quietly, he had been collecting works by Warhol, Basquiat, Ed Ruscha, Jean-Michel Basquiat, and dozens of others. The collection was eventually valued at tens of millions of dollars. He died on May 29, 2010, in Venice Beach. He was 74. The man who blew open American cinema rests in a churchyard in Taos, the same town where he nearly lost his mind 4 decades earlier, and where he seems, finally, to have found a kind of peace. The next man understood evil better than most, because he had survived it at 20 years old, in a prison camp in occupied France, Donald Pleasence, the Cimetière Saint-Pierre in Aix-en-Provence, in the south of France, a city of golden stone and warm winters and light that painters have chased for centuries. Pleasence settled here in his later years, fell in love with the region's quietness, and was buried here in 1995. His grave is elegant and understated, in a city that rewards people who take the time to look. He played Blofeld in You Only Live Twice. Bald, scar-faced, stroking a white cat in a hidden volcano. He played Dr. Loomis in Halloween, the psychiatrist who understood that something behind Michael Myers' eyes had simply stopped being human. In both roles, the genius was the same. Stillness. He made you afraid of what he wasn't saying. And here is where that stillness came from. During World War II, Pleasence was an RF pilot whose aircraft was shot down over France. He spent a year in a German prisoner of war camp. He was 20 years old. He came home thin and quiet and went immediately into acting, as if the stage were the only place left where things made sense. He worked without pause for 50 years. Over 200 films and television appearances. He was never precious. He took the villain when asked, appeared in films beneath his ability, because the work was what mattered. The controversy around Pleasence is a small but telling one. The horror community, which adored him, which had given him some of his most iconic roles, never quite gave him the serious critical recognition his craft deserved. He was dismissed as a genre actor. The fact that he had played Shylock, Iago, and a dozen major classical roles before horror found him was largely ignored by the people writing the reviews. He died in 1995 to brief obituaries. It was the horror fans, not the critics, who built his legacy in the years that followed. He died on February 2, 1995, following open-heart surgery. He was 75. The man who told us that evil wore a blank face now rests in a sunlit city in southern France, where the light is warm and the streets smell of lavender, and very few visitors know to look for him. And the next man gave horror something it had never had before, a laugh, a voice, an identity it has never quite recovered from. Vincent Price. There is no grave. There is no marker, the Pacific Ocean, off the coast of California. Somewhere between the shoreline and the horizon, in water that shifts between gray and green depending on the season. His ashes were scattered here after his death in 1993. If you want to stand where Vincent Price rests, you stand at the edge of the sea and look out, and that is all there is, that laugh. Unmistakable, theatrical, delicious, the laugh of a man who was entirely in on the joke and wanted everyone to know it. He made horror films into art, and then into camp, and then into something genuinely loved by multiple generations who agreed on very little else. But here is the secret Vincent Price almost never discussed. He had a degree in art history from Yale and a second degree from the Courtauld Institute in London. He was a serious, rigorous scholar of painting. He co-founded a program through Sears that made original artwork, real artwork, not prints, available to ordinary Americans who could never afford to visit a museum. He corresponded with art historians. He wrote cookbooks that were actually excellent. He gave lectures on Renaissance painting to audiences who had come expecting a horror story and stayed for something more. The Vincent Price behind the persona was a man of genuine intellectual depth, and he wore the persona lightly because he was never afraid the person underneath might disappoint. The controversy that attached to his name came from outside rather than from anything he did. During the McCarthy era, Price was among the Hollywood figures investigated for alleged communist sympathies. In his case, primarily because of his civil rights work and his friendship with figures who had been blacklisted. He was never formally charged with anything, but the investigations left a shadow that he never fully escaped in certain quarters of the industry. In his final years, Parkinson's disease stole his voice. The instrument he had used to terrify and delight millions, gone silent, he could no longer make himself heard. He died on October 25, 1993, the day after what would have been his 82nd birthday. From lung cancer, he gave horror a voice that no one has equaled. That voice is scattered now over the Pacific. What remains is the echo of a laugh that could fill any room it entered, and did for decades, and does still. When the films play on late-night television and the lights go down and you are briefly, helplessly, in exactly the right kind of fear, the next man showed up to work dying. He did it for his children, and the performance he gave was extraordinary. Raul Julia, the Santa Rosa Memorial Park in Bayamón, Puerto Rico, just west of San Juan, where the heat is heavy and the music never fully stops, and where Raul Julia was buried at 54 years old, in the island that had made him, in soil he had never fully left behind even when the world was watching him from Broadway stages and Hollywood screens. He played M. Bison in Street Fighter, knowing he was dying. He took the role for his children, who loved video games, so they would have something to watch. He arrived on set already sick, already diminished, and gave the character the full force of his craft. That magnificent, operatic theatricality that made even a low-budget action film feel grand. The other actors on set later said they were in awe of what he was doing with material that didn't deserve it. He didn't care about the material. He cared about his kids. But M. Bison was a footnote in a career of uncommon ambition. He had come from Puerto Rico to New York in the 1960s, with nothing except an absolute conviction that the stage was where he belonged. 6 Tony Award nominations. He played Othello, Macbeth, Mac the Knife, Dracula. He played Shakespeare and Brecht in English and in Spanish. He was a titan, and behind the curtain, he was spending his own money and his own time fighting hunger. He co-founded the Hunger Project, traveled to Central America and Africa, raised money for earthquake relief in Mexico. He was profoundly Catholic, profoundly political, profoundly committed to a world beyond the spotlight. The controversy that surrounded him was largely about how he was treated by Hollywood rather than anything he did. Despite his stage reputation, one of the greatest stage actors of his generation, he was consistently cast in supporting roles in film, often as villains or ethnic caricatures, often in material far beneath his ability. The industry saw him as exotic rather than leading, and he navigated that with a grace that should have been unnecessary. In October 1994, he suffered a massive stroke on the eve of his wedding anniversary. He never regained consciousness. He died on October 24, one day before his 55th birthday. His body was flown home to Puerto Rico. The island mourned him as one of its own, which he was. Always, he played every villain with a smile and every hero with his whole heart. The last man on this list invented a laugh in rehearsal one afternoon, and it set the template for cinematic evil for the next 80 years. Richard Widmark, the North Stamford Cemetery in Stamford, Connecticut, a quiet, old New England burying ground surrounded by the kind of stone walls and bare-limbed trees that belong to a place that has been there a long time and intends to remain. Richard Widmark is buried here, in the region he had chosen over Hollywood, in the ground of a state he had come to call home, in the decades after the industry finished needing him the way it once had. Tommy Udo in Kiss of Death pushed a wheelchair-bound woman down a staircase and laughed. It was 1947. Audiences had never seen anything like it. Widmark was 32 years old, and it was his film debut. He was nominated for an Academy Award immediately. That laugh, high, unhinged, genuinely frightening, was something he invented in rehearsal, almost casually, and it became one of the most imitated sounds in cinema. Every screen sociopath since 1947's owes something to an afternoon's work by a man who had come from radio and didn't yet know what kind of actor he was going to be. He knew quickly enough that he didn't want to be only that, He worked with John Ford, Stanley Kubrick, Henry Hathaway. He played good men and ambiguous men with the same care. He was thoughtful about his choices in a way Hollywood rarely rewarded. The controversy that followed Widmark was almost entirely structural. The industry, the critics, the audience all wanted more Tommy Udo, and he kept refusing to give it to them. He turned down roles that would have made him richer and more famous because they were too similar to the thing he had already done. That restraint was respected by other actors and mostly ignored by the press. Late in his life, a minor controversy emerged around the disposition of his estate and the preservation of his film archive. Questions about which prints were being maintained, which interviews had been given, and to whom. He had been married to the same woman for 55 years, and after her death in 1997, he grew increasingly remote, increasingly uninterested in the industry's attempts to revisit his career with retrospectives and tributes. He died on March 24, 2008. He was 93. He had said what he needed to say on screen. That was enough. The man whose debut laugh defined screen villainy for a generation rests in a Connecticut cemetery where the stone walls have stood longer than Hollywood itself, and where the neighbors knew him as someone who planted gardens and avoided cameras, not someone who pushed anyone down any stairs. Every man on this list was paid to make you afraid of them. They studied cruelty the way other people study medicine or architecture. With rigor, with dedication, with a respect for the craft that never appeared on screen because craft is invisible when it works. What they shared was not darkness. It was commitment, the willingness to go somewhere uncomfortable on behalf of a story, to give a face to the thing audiences needed to see defeated. So the hero's victory would mean something. Most of their graves are quiet. Some have no graves at all. The Pacific holds Vincent Price's ashes. The desert holds Marlon Brando's. The ocean off Perth holds everything Heath Ledger might have become. In a churchyard in Taos, Dennis Hopper rests in the town where he nearly destroyed himself and where he somehow found peace. In a garden in North London, Alan Rickman's ashes lie in a place with no theatrics, no drama, no audience. Raul Julia rests in Puerto Rico, in the island that never left him. Richard Widmark is in a Connecticut cemetery where the stone walls belong to a different century. Gene Hackman is in the mountains above Santa Fe, in the land he loved, next to the woman he didn't know had already left. The screen is dark now, but if you sit very quietly, if you wait just long enough, you can still hear them.